You are seated at the power table. I'm Shirley Osborne, writer, politician, journalist, global woman, and unflinching advocate for power for women. So, what is it? What is it that engenders this apparently uncontrollable predilection among adult human males for very young girl children? Is it evolutionary predisposition, the idea that younger females are more likely to be more easily fertile and for a longer time than older women, thereby increasing men's chances of being able to reproduce more versions of themselves, as in have more children? And that would be a very comprehensible reason, actually, but for the fact that in many, many instances, the girl is too young to reproduce, so having his children could not possibly be the reason. So, what is it? Why do human males, adult human males, go after girl children with such alacrity and insistence? And more specifically, what is it that has men in so many different parts of our world resist the raising of the age of consent to sex and to marriage? That's what we're talking about today on the Power Table. I'm Shirley Osborne, and this is the Power Table. Thank you for joining our conversations about women, power, and the patriarchy. Welcome. To understand why laws protecting young girls from child marriage face systemic resistance globally, or why modern beauty standards increasingly demand that adult women modify their bodies to mimic prepubescence, we're going to have to look past individual psychology, individual pathology, and examine what appears to be a structural, collective psychological defense mechanism. The question we need to ask is straightforward but uncomfortable. What are men afraid of when they look at a fully mature, autonomous adult woman? What are men afraid of when they look at a fully mature, autonomous adult woman? In the United States and in Somalia, men resist vehemently and with tears no less when legislators seek to make it unlawful for men to marry girl children or to raise the age of consent to sex. And those are only two of the countries. In the parliaments of states as diverse as Alaska, Oklahoma, and California, bills that would have raised the age of consent have repeatedly failed to pass the vote. In Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, men protested so vehemently against raising the marriage age, and violently actually, that the government caved and abandoned the cause or repealed legislation that they had already managed to get passed. So when we connect the global resistance against raising the age of marriage to the cultural obsession with physical smallness and female hairlessness, for example, in the westernized countries, a clear pattern emerges. We come to realize that it is not only about sexual desire, but indubitably about the maintenance of domination, of dominance. It points to a deep-seated aversion among traditional and modern men alike toward adult female peerhood. The reality of engaging with an equal partner who possesses physical maturity, full agency, and socioeconomic leverage. In other words, these men specifically want women that they can control, overpower, and dominate. And children with no skills, no education, money, or physical capacity to resist, and skinny, weak women fit the bill. Now, to analyze this logically, we have to first separate basic evolutionary biology from cultural exploitation. So let's look at the biological baseline. Evolutionary psychology tells us that human males naturally look for markers of youth and fertility. That's a concept known as neoteny. Neoteny is an evolutionary phenomenon where an organism slows its physical development, causing it to retain juvenile or infantile traits into adulthood. It's also referred to as juvenilization or pedomorphosis. Pedomorphosis, pedo as in pediatric. It is a key driver in the evolutionary history of several species, which makes sense. Younger members of a species tend to be generally more virile, more fertile, yes? In humans, this juvenilization includes smooth skin, bright eyes, lack of facial and pubic hair. So in the primitive context, in days when we were all ignorant, uneducated, unscientific, and beast-like, These were the only available indicators of reproductive health. They tell that she's likely to be able to bear many children over a long period of time. So, human evolution and the development of science have brought us to a stage where there are, or ought to be, there ought to be, there is, or there ought to be consideration of factors other than this apparent physical fitness to reproduce the species. So, one would expect, for example, that civility, reason, and the science of human childhood would be weighty factors. What we see today, however, particularly in the Western societal expectation for adult women, is a kind of modern distortion. Some groups of women routinely starve themselves into thinness, surgically reshape themselves into Barbie forms, dress like teenagers, and completely eradicate pubic and body hair via practices like Brazilian waxing, for example, in order to meet these male expectations. That is not a natural biological preference. It is what is called a supernormal stimulus. Now, in biology, a supernormal stimulus is an exaggerated version of a natural cue that triggers an amplified unnatural response. So, by demanding that adult women strip away the physical markers of sexual maturity, the culture creates a hyper real aesthetic that blurs the line between adult womanhood and prepubescence, aka childhood. Now, this physical appearance minimizes the visual and physical reality of the woman's adulthood, making her appear less formidable and therefore more easily placed in the category of controllable. Children are controllable, yes? It is important to note, it's critical actually, to note that this recategorizing of women into childhood, towards childhood, has the other effect, the additional effect of placing children in the same category of desirability as the women who look like them, and therefore places girl children at increased exposure to and risk of the sexual attentions of adult males. That's not by accident. Now, science and physical appearance tell us that human beings are moderately sexually dimorphic, which means that men are generally physically larger and stronger than women. Historically, patriarchal structures have used this physical asymmetry to justify institutional dominance. Bigger is better, might is right. I'm larger, so of course I'm going to be in charge. That kind of thinking. However, as women achieve greater economic, social, and legal equality, physical size becomes a less effective tool for control. Because when a woman has her own bank account, her own education, and her own legal protection, she becomes an absolute peer and is not bound to obey. She has options and she can use them. For a masculinity built entirely on the premise of dominance and submission, this equality feels like a threat. The preference of smaller, hyper youthful, or submissive women therefore acts as a psychological buffer, minimizing the man's risk of rejection and preserving the hierarchy of the patriarchy, the power imbalance. Because a smaller, younger, or less experienced partner lowers the risk of rejection or peer level criticism for the man and allows a fragile ego to maintain an illusion of authority based purely on age, size, or societal or financial leverage, rather than by earning respect through mutual vulnerability and competence. Now, when we scale this psychological framework up to the geopolitical level, we can see exactly why it is that men around the world resist laws that outlaw child marriage. In societies where men fight to keep the marriage age low, the objective is really purely hedonic, right? It is structural. Marrying a child ensures that the woman enters a union before she has developed independent identity, critical thinking skills, and economic options. So it guarantees a longer window of total dependence. Total dependence, generally her entire life. The resistance to raising the age of consent is a desperate attempt to retain total resource and lineage control. Resource control because the woman herself is a resource. the children that will come of the union are resources. And of course, lineage control is very, very important generally, but it's specifically important, especially important in certain communities, certain traditions, certain cultures, in ways that might be different to how it's important in other places, right? It is also an acknowledgement by the men in these cultures that they cannot or will not compete or negotiate with a woman who has reached full psychological and legal maturity, which is another way of saying that these men are not willing or able to expand themselves and level up to the age of reason, science, and human capacity. It also says to me that they are ignorant of or uninterested in national development and the improvement of conditions in their countries. Health, education, living standards, quality of life, and so on. Because studies consistently show, conclusively and quantitatively, that is mathematically, the math adds up, that to the extent that women are included in the workings of the country, the national economy improves. The quality of life of government and governance, the quality of health and education all improve, and people live longer and better. Men, women, and children live longer and better. So the maintenance of child marriage militates against national development. The research is clear. If we are to have, therefore, a reasoned, quantitative, and honest discussion about global gender dynamics, we have to stop treating these issues as if they're isolated cultural quirks or fringe pathologies. They're not fringe, they're not unusual, and they're all connected. So the modern insistence on nubile, hairless, minimized female bodies in the West, and the legislative pushback, the traditional pushback against protecting young girls in the East are two sides of the same coin. They are both system infrastructure. They are tools designed to avoid the presumed challenge of the adult female peer. So the question that we must pose to the data and to the culture, the questions we must pose are these. How much of what we classify as male preference is actually a systemic psychological defense mechanism? Why truly does modern masculinity require the physical, economic, or age-based minimization of women in order to function? And what is it about the fully realized autonomous adult woman that terrifies men so deeply? What is it? This has been The Power Table. Thank you for joining me. I'm Shirley Osborne. Until next time, take good care. Thanks for pulling up a chair at the Power Table. If this conversation lit a fire in you, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, patriarchy won't dismantle itself. So don't just listen, join the movement. Join me, Shirley Osborne, at the Power Table every week. Subscribe, share this episode, and come find me on Substack or Patreon for exclusive events and deeper conversation. Links are in the show notes. Until next time, keep claiming your power. Together, we're building a different kind of power. Take good care.